Hi, folks. Welcome to Monday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast videocast. I've got Stuart Lockhead, Jimmy Hutton with me. I'm Norrie Stewart. We're going to have a quick chat about the presser. Nothing too controversial today, but we're going to spend a bit of time on Brexit today. So all of you that have just covered your ears and run screaming to the toilet, we're still going to do it, whether you like it or not. Let's start with the presser, though. Jimmy, we'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, it was an interesting one today. Some strange things came up, but unusually sort of medical minutiae that they were wanting to go at. They seem to be wanting to get at the details of a care home in Glasgow where 7 cases appeared on Friday. I thought the actual fact that we have a relatively robust system in place now that pointed out, wait a minute, that's a minor spike at that point, 7 cases in a care home. So they've sent in a presumably an incident management team and what have you, and they're doing testing and all that. I think the press were desperate to get the name of it just so they could splash it over the papers for tomorrow. But that and dentists, we had quite a few questions on that as to whether private dentistry is moving forward at a faster rate. And I do find it interesting that journalists seem to feel absolutely free to second guess dentists. After all, dentists are all medical professionals. Are they suggesting in some way that...
And dentists they're all private.
But are they suggesting in some way that there's some kind of cowboy dentist roaming around the country doing procedures that aren't yet quite allowed?
I don't know what a private, I don't know what, there seem to be some practices that don't do NHS and other practices that do NHS, but the ones that do NHS also do private. So I don't see how you...
They're all private. They're not paid by the NHS. They're not paid their wages. They get so much for each procedure, but they're private businesses.
I think people forget, or especially if you're a journalist, deliberately pretend to forget that we don't live in a country where the people that run the health service can simply tell people that run dentist practices what to do.
No, you don't. There was a recommendation. It's not the law.
Exactly. There's guidelines out there. There's recommendations. And as I say, we are talking about medical professionals here. So they're likely to be, if they are bending recommendations somewhat, they're likely to be doing it in a very safe way. You know what I mean? They may have decided that, hold it, some of these modern dental practices may have pressurized environments, where they're sucking the air out, so there's no such a problem with droplets.
My dentist once told me when she pulled a tooth and she gave me antibiotics as I left, and she told me that the worst place in the world to have an open wound is your mouth. Because it's so full of bacteria and you're eating and all that. So hence giving me the antibiotics before I had an infection.
There's an awful lot of very dangerous bacteria live in your throat. But as long as it stays there, it's not going to get past your mouth, your stomach.
The point I was really getting to, if that is the case, they're going to be well up on procedures for keeping everything.
That's true. I tell you, can I point out a slightly cheerier point? As a result of this care home possible spike in Glasgow with 7 cases, Jean Freeman was able to assure the journalists that we picked that up through weekly staff testing, which we do now.
Wait for the headline tomorrow, and it'll be testing finally catches up with asymptomatic cases in care homes. I play a game now. Every question that's asked at the presser, I concoct the headline in my head that question is supposed to generate.
Yeah, somebody will try for that one tomorrow. As I say, mate, I thought it was interesting. I'd kind of developed a wee cynical streak over the weekend as well, having a look at certain things. Well, no, the weekend because I was zonked half of it, but having a wee look at things this morning and last night, where I thought an awful lot of stories in the media were trying, particularly in Scotland, trying to direct us away from COVID, trying to not tell us that it's over by any means, but the government are being a bit too effective, a bit too efficient on it at the moment. So reporting on it just boosts the government somewhat. So there were an awful lot of stories about Brexit, about power grabs and disagreements between parliaments and what have you. You know, a lot of what if this could happen. So it'll be an interesting watch this week to see just how far the media like to go in terms of, didn't look at that, look at this.
What the media have managed to do is turn Sturgeon's statement on Sunday on Mar about quarantining visitors to Scotland into an anti-English trope. And as I said to you guys earlier, the question that I would like to hear somebody ask Sturgeon, because it might put her on wrong foot her, is if Scotland has a massive spike, will you close the Scottish border to protect the English?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes.
Now that numbers are pretty low in Scotland, it wouldn't take a massive spike for our numbers to actually look pretty bad again. You know what I mean? Because the R number, because of the level of cases, they're all pretty low. So a localised spike could affect it. But it'd have to go some to affect it to get our numbers up to the state that England is still in at the moment, wouldn't it?
It's maybe worth reiterating why that is. That the R number is an indication of the
propensity of the
spread potential. It's not anything to do with the number of cases in any country. So you can have a high R number and a low number of cases.
Yeah,
we're looking at a situation at the moment. We've got the biggest lockdown easing day coming on Wednesday. Indoor pubs, restaurants. This is they've spoken about it themselves. The First Minister and her assistants, and they're a bit nervous about this. But we should be looking for any possible spike 2 weeks on Wednesday, 3 weeks on Wednesday.
2 to 3 weeks, they reckon.
Just into the beginning of August. Now, if I recall correctly, the beginning of August is when all the journalists go on their holidays. So it's going to be a very different press we're going to get in the first week of August.
Stuart, I would hate to think you're suggesting that the Scottish government timed this so there was nobody to write stories about it.
No, far from it. I wouldn't think that way at all. However, I am curious to know what it will be like then. Right now, they're going on their holidays. Some of the school holidays are starting next week in England. And so there'll be a lot of people that you normally see on the telly and writing things in the papers and all that vanish. They all get their holidays on the same day every year, which is when the school holidays start.
I'm kind of looking forward to that because I've been a bit disappointed by how the Premier League of the Scottish press have performed during this. So it'll be interesting to see what the First Division and the Championship are like.
That's a very good point.
One thing about the press conferences, it really has shone a light on the standard. And if I would say the originality of thought lacking amongst our premier journalists. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of questions that were just simply asked. I think it was you, Jimmy, said you'd followed a thread with a lot of journalists on Twitter yesterday.
I seen that one, mate, and it was almost like something they were all jumping in. Quite a few of them, the likes of Gordon Cree and that, dived in to defend their honour because their abilities were being questioned.
But what was it you said they already had?
Yeah, they kind of already had half-baked their stories, the idea of the piece that they were looking to put out at 6 o'clock news or into tomorrow's paper. So that's why they were asking these questions. And the thought just occurred to me, then surely come up with better stories so you can come up with better questions because I'm tired also of the amount of times that somebody gets a question answered and then the journalist, maybe not the one straight after them, but the one after that, goes back and asks exactly the same thing.
It's true. But mind you, I sometimes feel sorry for them these days. I know, look, we have moaned about them for weeks and weeks and weeks. And as you said, both of you said, we get to watch them in action day after day after day. And you really get to know somebody when you watch them at work day after day. Whereas they've got deadlines to meet, they've got, the time, they've got to do 3,000 words about such and such a time every day they're working. I'm feeling sorry for them today, but that won't last. Don't worry.
I'm not, because to me, every question they ask should be turned on its head for me. It should be, what is Sturgeon? I mean, if they want to push a unionist narrative, it should be, what is Sturgeon prepared to do to protect, support, blah, 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 the rest of the UK? And they don't seem to have the imagination to do that. Having said that, I fully expect to hear a question asked in that frame tomorrow. Okay. Because I've got a sneaky feeling there are people watching us.
Yeah, well, there are definitely people watching this. One of the questions I'm still waiting to hear asked by the press is, we're going on about, just for a couple of days, about Spain being left off this list so that people couldn't go to Spain for their holidays. And I kept waiting for just one of these journalists to ask, well, what about Scottish tourism? Did you consider the effect on Scottish tourism when you said that people couldn't go to Spain? Now, that would have been a clever question to ask, wouldn't it?
Well, I think what will happen is that Menorca especially will be writing to the First Minister to thank her for not allowing people to travel to Spain, because they've just had 4 or 5 cases, 3 or 4 maybe cases imported from the UK into Menorca. So her argument can be, we're not sending people to these islands because we've still got coronavirus, and so we don't want to risk our Spanish friends.
Well, this opening up on Wednesday with pubs and restaurants and what have you could be risky. It's proved risky everywhere else it's opened up, basically. There were spikes in Germany. There's ridiculous spikes in the States at the moment, but for obvious reasons that we're not going into. But I worry that, because you did mention today about people camping and what have you, and some of the anecdotal evidence that you see over the weekend has been horrific. People misbehaving, just wild camping wherever they bloody feel like it.
I think all wild campers should be taken out and shot. Did you hear that, Stuart?
I heard that. It's all right. I've got a machine gun in the back of the van.
You're a wild camping enthusiast, are you not?
Oh yes. I think it's a bit, I believe strongly in what they call hydraulic theory. If you shut one place, people will go and do something else. And that's effectively what it's been. The pubs have been shut, so people have been having parties in the house, and the beaches, they've been going somewhere else to drink. And once they get out, now they've got out there, they've still got no the legal campsites. You can't get in unless you're booked. So you can't go to them. So people have just turned up in their cars and blocked the roads. I'm not the least bit surprised. That's how hydraulic theory works.
I'm not sure that you've got the evidence to support your hydraulic theory, Stuart.
Oh,
not on the drinking side. I've been quite surprised at how few huge groups have been gathering, to have a party. I know in my street there's been basically every fortnight there's been a get together just down the road, but everybody's social distanced when they were on the street. I don't know what they were doing in the flat, and they've been well behaved, and normally that is a riot. It's the same flat. It's obviously some guy invites everybody to his place,
Well, hydraulic theory does work, generally speaking. If you suppress something one place, socially about with people involved, they'll pop up somewhere else and do it. That's what normally happens with people.
Perhaps, but I haven't seen it, I have to say. Can we move on to Brexit, guys?
Oops.
Just to lose half the audience immediately. I can hear the clicks. We're coming up to the last July trade meeting. I think it's 21st of the month.
The 20th of July session will be a full round. This is the last chance. The EU believes that is the week where the UK must make a move.
Well, it appears that Johnson and Co are going to stick to their red lines. Barnier has underlined the fact that they seem to be looking for full membership rights without membership, without the responsibilities.
Shall I give them the quote? Bishop Barnier told the House of Lords, the UK in each of the sectors is asking for a status that is more or less equivalent to that of a member state for the single market, the customs union, Schengen, rules of origin, mutual recognition, financial services, professional qualifications, data, and exchange of electricity. Now, the financial services is the big one for the UK, isn't it?
Well, it's becoming more and more apparent that Project Fear was right. You know, I mean, on the trade side, I just can't see unless what they're going to do, this is the British government at the end is basically capitulate on fishing, blah 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 blah, all the other stuff, get it over and done with in one fell swoop. So it's not drip thread into the Brexiteer press that they back down on this and they back down on that. Because it seems very unlikely that Barnier is going to accept anything bar they obey the rules.
Yeah, well, I think that you could be right on that one, Norrie. I think it could just be one fell swoop at the end. I think we're going to end up somewhere, as I've said before, we're somewhere around no deal, but they'll cobble together some kind of deal that makes it look like there is one. But maybe it's significant that Nigel Farage has been absolutely shut out of mainstream media for weeks now. He only really appeared in that silly story where he went to America and then came back and broke quarantine rules. So it's significant that the press, maybe they're finally taking instruction from Conservative Central Office. Keep that clown away from us, and then all we'll get is one rant at the end where he's not been in the press for months and he looks a bit rabid because he's got so much to spit out in the one rant.
They keep talking about a landing zone in this, when they're talking about these negotiations, a landing zone, and this is presumably is the day when they can sign things off. But they're trying to maneuver this landing zone on the British side so that it can be all over in a rush with the MPs and the extreme Brexiteers. In other words, you hinted at it already, Norrie, I think. So that they want this agreement to be late, so late that they can't be a drip, drip, drip and a big campaign against it by the extreme Brexiteers if they back off on their red lines.
Well, the fact of the matter is there's so much power now being taken away from Parliament and into the hands of the government that it is possible that could work against the Brexiteers.
Absolutely.
It is possible that the government just turns around, throws up his hands and goes, right, okay, fishing, you can have it. And there's nothing the Brexiteers will be able to do because they won't be able to fight it on the floor of the House of Commons.
I don't think the Brexiteers would ever get the parliamentary support from the Labour Party that they had in the past. You know, the Labour Party were quite happy to stymie votes, put their votes behind something, abstain in other situations. Whatever happens now, there's not going to be any parliamentary campaign against it. It'll just be the outliers like Mark Francois and Steve Baker that have something to say, but I think they'll be very much in the minority.
Well, I was interested to see that Barnier actually outlined the British position on fishing was that it must look like, appear as.
Yeah.
Independent coastal state.
Apparently, this is going to take much longer than the withdrawal agreement, which was suddenly vaguely signed off on the Irish deal, wasn't it? That they had to at the last minute. They can't do this with this because this is the legal deal. and it has to go into every language of every country. It's got to be tested by the lawyers in every country in every language. So it's got to be, signed off much quicker than they think.
Well, what people forget, I mean, people go on about Boris got a deal. What they forget is that deal took 2 years under May, and all Boris did was went in and tweaked a couple of chapters.
Yeah.
That was 2 years in the writing. And now we've got literally 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, everything has to be sitting there in October for it to go through our Parliament, the European Parliament, and the other states' parliaments. I think they'll cobble, as I say, I think they'll cobble something together, and it's noticeable that our press didn't really pick up on Barnier's characterisation of that position, Norrie, but you did, because it is. I'd imagine that the British government position is like that in quite a few areas. It has to look like we're doing this, because if it doesn't, we can't get it through our press.
I can't see any reason they wouldn't just repeat what they've done so far, which is tell the Irish that there'll be no border, there'll be no customs checks, there'll be no posts. It'll just be like it always was. And then at the last minute, start building border posts.
The only problem is, mate, if there's physical border posts, there is an issue with people. It doesn't take much to blow up a border post, mate, and then can you imagine the headlines that would get worldwide?
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it'll happen between the south and the north. I think the border posts will be built on British soil, on this side of the Irish Channel.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks so they can still say there's no border posts in Northern Ireland. All the checks take place on mainland Britain.
Dunastranraer and Heysham, I think, is where.
Yeah, so they'll bullshit as their want.
The other, apparently, the big issue that they're still disputing, which is apparently very difficult, is state aid. In other words, there's the question of 3,000 Nissan jobs were lost in Barcelona. And can you possibly mention this earlier on? Perhaps it's before we started recording. There's all these Nissan jobs in London. Now, will the British government rush in and rescue those jobs with a huge bit of state aid, and then very upset that they lost their Nissan jobs in Barcelona?
Yeah, well, that's what they're worried about, is essentially Britain underpins
undercutting all the other parts of
manufacturing in the UK to undercut European manufacturing, similar manufacturing. But I'd love to see this deal they did with Nissan up in Sunderland.
Well, it's not a done deal. It can still be. I'm sure.
Well, I'm talking about what the British government promised them.
Well, that's fair.
Well, I was reading something this morning about every car that comes out of that Sunderland plant. It doesn't meet state of origin rules. You know what I mean? Half of the parts that go into it are not manufactured in the UK.
70% of the cars don't. Bits.
And the bits are made here, so they can't be exported or imported into the EU because they don't meet the rules. They're not British cars.
Maybe they've got a secret plan to quadruple our manufacturing of car parts.
Right, that'll work.
Yeah, the Tories. Can you imagine them actually paying for something like that?
Well, apparently sorry, Jimmy.
No, I was just going to say, the way that Britain is these days, we couldn't quadruple production of sausage rolls, never mind fucking car parts.
He's always got a jam, hasn't he?
I believe we have room on the jam assembly lines.
I'd love to meet a jam assembly line just to sit next to it. Well, wet finger. That sounds fun.
It would appear that the state aid issue has got another complication, which we're going to cover, I think, tomorrow, which is it runs into the legal problems about the state aid. This power grab that London's trying to make over the devolved governments in the UK. Because that used to be handled by the EU, and this is a power that London is claiming for itself.
London are desperate to have for themselves, yes, so they can. And let's be honest, London can't be trusted with any powers, because look at the people that are in power down there and how they abuse any power. I mean, it's ludicrous just how many friends of Dominic Cummings have made profit since he It's only December they won the election, and they've handed out hundreds of millions of pounds to people.
It's interesting that the way devolution's coming back to bite them, because effectively nobody foresaw us leaving the EU. Therefore, all the power that sat on things like state aid, etc., that sat within the EU was basically ignored in the devolution settlement.
Yeah, they never envisioned it having to be divvied up, and now that they're looking at it, basically the settlement says that these powers come to Edinburgh and go to Cardiff.
Because they took the shortcut of saying, if we don't say it's devolved,
if we don't say it's retained,
if we don't say it's devolved, it's retained, because that made things so much easier. Forgetting completely about the huge amount of power that sat with the EU.
There is a quote here to do with, for example, Tony Connolly, the wonderful Irish journalist. It's unclear whether or not Scotland will have to acquiesce to state aid rules dictated by Westminster, especially those rules which might prevent Scotland from putting up clever barriers to trade from the south. That's interesting. And none of this is in the devolution settlement. Sir George Peretz, QC, who's written extensively on it. So I'm wondering just what he's thinking about.
Well, what they're going to do is, it's the power grab that we intend to discuss in depth tomorrow. So effectively, Brexit is forcing the Westminster government to show up the lie that they told everybody in the devolved countries.
Well, here's a controversial
Brexit.
Here's a controversy. He finishes up by saying, so this is talking about Scotland. They have huge scope to do things once EU law is taken away. From the Scottish point of view, Brussels telling them what to do is one thing. Westminster is quite another. State aid is part of this. So the writer of this seems to know something that, no, that's the QC, seems to know something that we haven't discussed.
They're trying to they're writing the legislation just now to take that power and keep it at Westminster, shall we put it that way? Because at the moment we leave the EU, get an agreement, whatever those state power rules look like, sit at Westminster unless they allow them to come back to
they should. No, the other way around, Norrie. Those powers automatically revert to Holyrood and Cardiff.
Well, this is what I was about to suggest.
No, the promise was they would, but they're writing the legislation to stop that happening.
What I'm going to suggest is that what this QC seems to be implying, and it's possibly will come about, because apparently in Northern Ireland, the leaders there, even Arlene Foster and the guy in Wales, his name Drakeford. Anyway, the three devolved administrations are liable to go to court, I think, almost certainly, if this is what's being suggested.
And that's already been decided at the High Court. This is all part of the Seoul Convention, and it's meaningless. It'll go through the courts again and be identified as an area that we cannot do anything but acquiesce to Westminster's
wishes. That's a good point, Norrie. If it goes through the court, I quite like to see it go through to the courts again, even if it's going to be lost. But it creates a point of friction that the people can see.
But that, I mean, okay, we do it on one. Well, we're going to have to do it, depending on how they do the legislation. They might just do the legislation as a coverall. But if they do it specifically in areas of fishing, agriculture, food standards, if they go through that one at a time, we're going to be in court till the late 21,000s.
Aye. Alternatively, our government could just say, you know what, nah, you bent us over and we refuse to pucker up. Stick your power grab up your ass. We're going to go independent.
Well, they've already said that. Everybody except the Tories at Holyrood is supporting the Scottish government's stance, which is get to. We want our powers.
Well, there's so much, mate.
Give us our powers, we'll throw a hissy fit.
There's so much going on now, mate. There's even discussion in England that renationalising English water because it's been such a disaster, the whole privatisation down there. Can you imagine what kind of public funds would have to be poured into that?
Oh, good.
Just how much Scotland would end up paying for English water to be renationalised. It would be billions of pounds. Our share of that would be massive.
Are we not entitled to consequentials from that if they're going to buy English water?
I very much doubt it, mate. I'm pretty sure they'd find a way to.
No, they'll call it a national project. That's how they get around
a national project. And
I know, it's like the trains, Crossrail in London and all those wonderful new sewers they got. Apparently, we had to pay for a share of that.
We did.
Why?
We did.
Why?
Because we occasionally go to London neighbours for a shite.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically
what, mate, it's possible. It's a nice way for you to put that, mate, but it's a bit far to go for one of them for me.
Well, I mean, that'll be an interesting one because that's cut and dried. If they take English water back into a nationalised company and there's a cost to it that we're expected to chip in for, having not sold off Scottish water, that's clear cut. That is an absolute clear cut situation. And anyway, we'll just charge England for the water we produce for them.
Well, they've got water meters down there, mate, so at least they'd be able to work out how much.
And that's another one. They've suddenly discovered that they're getting ripped off with their water meters as well, which everybody could have told them was going to happen.
Well, it's a strange one, mate. I read so much about, and you see so much about, Brexit and that last election there, and they talk about how the north of England's changed so much, and the north of England hasn't changed. The only difference happened this time is that the north of England voted the same way as the rest of England has been voting for the last 20 years, Tory. It's a Tory country, and the rest of the country isn't.
Here's a question for you, and this might be quite difficult, but could you give us, the listeners, one good thing that's going to come out of Brexit?
Dear me.
Okay, let me start. Scottish independence. Anything else?
We've been waiting for that one. We went all the way through from 2015 to where we are now, hoping for Brexit to produce Scottish independence. It doesn't look any closer on that.
It might take another couple of decades, but maybe the English would realise that the whole world isn't to blame for England being an absolute shithouse these days, and it's their own fault. They've elected Tory government after Tory government, and they elected a red Tory government for 13 years.
Well, I'm going to get the wording of this wrong. The joke I told you before we came on air, that supposedly, according to Twitter, is circulating around the Commonwealth. What's the... All right, okay, Stuart.
Closest thing to mediocrity.
No, the closest thing to stupidity. Scotland and Wales. Which I thought was quite good. Quite good.
Yeah, it is a joke which I'd be awkward sharing on my family WhatsApp group.
Yeah, but I mean, it is a thing that it's been a long time coming. The English have blamed everybody for everything. I mean, God, even the BBC News yesterday, the BBC News this morning are telling you there's a record number of migrants tried to cross the channel yesterday. They're still at the blaming culture, blame the whole planet for the ills of England. The reality is, you screwed over the last 2 centuries, you screwed over the entire planet, and it's coming back to haunt you. And you're not exceptional. You're not a land of milk and honey, and you are not a world-leading nation at anything anymore. Oh, wait a minute, you're pretty good at making a pig's arse of everything that happens, and you're damn good at not dealing with a pandemic.
Did you? That was a quick swerve. I know what you were going to say.
I'm doing making up headlines, and I'm trying to think of the headline that basically says, "Whinging Scots teach English to be whinging English, because they'll find a way to blame us."
Well, if it's no our fault, it'll be the Welsh or the Irish because they've got nobody else to blame.
Aye, that's true. That's true. I don't think they're really quite kind to the Welsh. I think they see them as sort of corgis, like the Queen's wee dogs.
Oh, did you see about that? The Queen apparently got involved in getting rid of a Labour government in Australia. I remember that, Gough Whitlam's Labour government, and the Governor General sacked them after 200 letters with crossing the oceans to the Queen. It was like a coup.
Well, that was
I'm
that's a
sure
British
that
government decision
that got rid of the Australian government, mate. The Queen just signed off on it.
But this comes out of their releasing their documentation on this after 30 years.
They're coming out this week, so it'd be very interesting to see.
Was it 30 years ago?
I
remember it.
1975.
Because they nearly did it in Canada as well, didn't they? There was a lefty government in Canada that was seen to be a threat to the ex-imperial overseers.
How the mighty have fallen, eh? Betty can't even get rid of the black sheep of her own family these days. Never mind take down international governments.
Does she not send them to America? Sorry.
Well, the ones that she doesn't like, the black sheep that she likes, he's allowed to do exactly what he wants, eh? And he's definitely not going to America.
No, he'll not be visiting his nephew.
The non-sweaty one, he'll never go to England again.
England? Do you think we should arrest him if he comes to Scotland?
I think it'd be no bad idea, mate, just for the hell of it. I'd love to see how apoplectic Jackson Carlow could actually get. Can you imagine how pink he would go? How close?
Try to get on the right side of the Donald. See, what's he building? I see there's a big stushy about him building something on one of his golf courses.
He's planning to redevelop Turnberry, apparently, mate.
Does it involve 4,000 luxury houses?
It'll probably involve a hell of a lot of houses around that hotel, but he owns enough. I'm not sure, but I believe he owns enough land around there, and the locals are kind of behind it. So if it brings a few jobs, I'm no fussed, mate. I'm sorry, but I've never been to Turnberry in my life.
If he finally puts his money where his mouth is, that'd be no bad thing, because he promised quite a lot for Aberdeen and never delivered that.
He never puts his money where his mouth is. He borrows it.
Somebody else's money, that's for certain. Do you think this?
Okay, if he puts Putin's money where his mouth is that all right?
Aye. Do you think this is the first indication that he kens he's absolutely no chance of winning this election, so he's now starting to look for plans for something to do for the next 4 years?
I look forward to the court cases where he tries to wrestle back control of all the companies he had supposedly to give up control to when he became president. That'll be fun. I wonder how many charities he'll have to set up to make himself a decent living.
I wonder if he'll be borrowing Boris's British plane, seeing he's not got Air Force One anymore.
Oh, he's got his own jet. He's probably got it rented out under a different flag at the moment.
Aye, probably. That's a good point. I had a wee spat with a boy.
He's flown 175 times using Air Force One to go and play golf at one of his golf courses since he became president.
Glasgow, it's down in Florida, isn't it?
He's got more than one.
All right. I mean, that's usually his favourite course.
He's got two in Scotland alone.
Anyway, I think we're just about exhausted it, guys, unless you've got something in particular that needs said.
No, really, mate.
Okay, well, tomorrow we're going to give the power grab a good shaking down.
Kick the tree and see what drops it.
Can we call it the boiling the frog episode? I like that.
Oh, I think it'll be a bit quicker than your boiled frog idea.
Damn fine book by Chris Brookmeyer back in the day, that one.
What, Boiling the Frog?
Boiling a Frog, aye. It's a really entertaining read round about the start of the Parliament in Edinburgh and the attempt by the organised religion to have some say in it. It's quite entertaining, well worth a look, and damn funny in bits.
Oh, God, I vaguely remember that. Yeah, I do vaguely remember it. Strange how quickly you forget what input the church actually still has with their people sitting in the Lords No Sikhs, no Muslims, no Hindus, just Christians.
There's also Christians sitting on school boards in Scotland.
Aye.
I'm sorry, they're Presbyterians. That's a whole different thing to a Christian. That's an entirely different thing.
They're just dour Christians, aren't they?
They didn't dance. Okay, folks. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks for being on, Stuart Lockhead and Jimmy Hutton. I'm Norrie Stewart, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again tomorrow, folks, where we'll rip apart the Westminster government. Cheers for now.